Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching. Welcome to EAR, End All Racism, on the American Doofus Show, ADS. The last episode of EAR, Star and I talked about the history of race, and Star did an incredible version of condensing centuries of history into a very understandable 1 hour presentation. And I want to again thank her. And Star and I will be joined by a comedic king tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about race in America today, the present. Now, we can do nothing about the past. We cannot change it. We can learn from it. We can ignore it. We can discover it, but we can't erase it. The past exists, but now the present and the future, we can impact. And I feel we must. There has been progress since the 1960s. Over the past 60 years, things have changed. They've changed slowly. They've changed painfully. They've changed begrudgingly. But there have been some changes. Now, EAR, End All Racism, is about just that, ending all racism everywhere. Becoming Americans, becoming humans, becoming earthlings instead of divided by race. And it's not about losing identities. It's not about losing individual identities or individual past. It's about replacing hate with love. But the focus here, as we start the episode about the present, here in 2021, and we're going to kind of go from 1900 up to where we're at now, or 1960 to where we're at now. Again, Star did such an exceptional job of the history. And if you have not seen that episode, please go back and watch it. But the focus here in 2021, it feels like to me, is black and white, the races, because of the actions and subsequent reactions to Breonna Taylor, to Elijah McClain, to Ahmaud Arbery, to George Floyd, David McAtee, Tyler Girth, and more, too many more. Am I wrong in stating that? Star, King, both of you welcome, of course, but it is the issue of black and white at the forefront as we stand here in 2021?
I'll lend that to Comedic King. Welcome aboard.
Thank
I'll
you.
let him answer that for you.
I absolutely think you are dead on with that statement. I think that it would be costly to say it's not. You get a lot of people out there that say it's not about black, it's not about white, but we have such a dark, long history together that it has to be about that. And when you really think about history and you think about history leading up to this point, um, it was founded on those ideas of black and white. So, absolutely, Barry, I think that is something that is very important when we talk about healing racism and eradicating racism.
Yes, and we have to acknowledge it. And by acknowledging it right from the start, um, we take some of the power away from it, I think. And I've got to say, I've always been so awed by how the black community took the power of the N word away. I thought that was absolutely awesome that the black community basically destroyed the power that that word had. And to me, that showed the unity the black community can have. Now, I'm an ignorant white guy just talking about what I I've seen here in the recent past. Is that wrong to say?
Yeah, if I can comment on that, I don't think that I think that we've usurped the power and kind of tried to flip it on its head. But in our usage of it, sometimes it still has a very negative connotation. It still has a very dangerous, sometimes I think, connotation when it focuses on looking at another human being, our brothers or our sisters, as something less than. Because a lot of times when we use it, it's used affectionately in some communities, but in other communities, it is used as a very negative, um, anti-Black word in terms of how we view our brothers and our sisters. So I don't think that we that we have, I don't think we've quite, yeah, capitalized on flipping it on its head all the way. I think it's sideways, but I don't think we've taken it and turned it all the way upside down.
And
That's just my perspective.
no, I think that's awesome because I just learned something because from let's say the white perspective, which people watching will say he's coming, and I'm coming from the white perspective. To me, you took the power of it away, but you telling me what you just told me shows that the word needs to be just totally eradicated, not just erased from Caucasian usage, but erased altogether.
I mean, you think about it, you don't, the word used to refer to Jewish people in a derogatory fashion, and I won't say it because I'm part Jewish, so I won't say that word.
I'm
But
not sure what it is.
it's been totally eradicated, and you cannot say that. They would never say that to refer to one another. You can't speak it in writing. You can't speak it from your mouth. It has. When I say totally been totally eradicated, that's what total eradication means.
I'm not sure what it is, so
Right.
and I'm not going to ask, but
Yeah.
yeah, see, and we're talking about things that impact us here today. We're talking
Mhm.
about present and race.
Mhm.
Meditating, your thoughts.
Just my thoughts in general, or the thoughts on that subject matter.
The thoughts on that subject first, and then we'll get into, because you're our guest tonight for a reason.
Right, right.
I mean, you're our guest tonight because you're the present of,
Right.
of what racism is,
Right.
or the word race.
My thoughts behind it is similar to Stars, as far as it being used as a derogatory term and also being used as a point of endearment. I personally think, and this is just me, I'm pretty in the middle. I'm not. I used to be radical, but I've come in the middle. So me personally, a lot of people, they look at it as a big deal, but I've looked at it as just a small piece of the puzzle, very, very small.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Yes.
Um, and when I think about that, I do believe that that word needs to be eradicated and it needs to be cleaned up. But that is going to take generations to do. And even in the process of doing that, we have to first realize um, the effect that it has on our community and the effect that it has on how we look to others. Because I've talked to a lot of Caucasians, and they've always said, "Why do you all call yourself this and that?" And we like to use the excuse we turn something negative into something positive, but at the end of the day, the world still looks at it. They still look at it the same way. So we might put an A on the end of that, but to everybody else, there's no difference. So
Yeah.
I'm agreeing.
Now that you've said that, and I think back, you're exactly right. I get uncomfortable when I hear it.
Yeah.
When I hear the word, no matter. I mean, I don't hear it from any white people that I'm around, but when I hear it from someone in a community of color, I get uncomfortable. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Being a little older, and again,
That's probably
growing up
what
in the
it is.
South, and in the 60s, and watching it be applied in terms of, again, a power construct and a power dynamic and a belittling of another human being. It is when I hear it, even from my own community, I kind of cringe. When I hear it in music, I cringe because it had power then. What I won't do is allow someone to say that to me and give it power. I won't do that. I'm like, okay, if that's what, okay, that's how you feel about it. I don't get in my feelings about someone else's hatred.
Right.
So that's one way that we can dismantle that word by
Absolutely.
not reacting to it when people say that.
Absolutely. Because
That doesn't mean you're not mad about it,
right. Right.
but you can't give them your power.
Exactly.
Out of let's just start like in 1960. Um, John F. Kennedy's about to become president in 3 years. There's, eventually there's the voters' right the Voters Act is passed. Eventually, there appears to be a slight change. That's how it looks from the white perspective. How does it feel from the perspective of communities of color, from where we were in the 60s to where we're at now?
Well, Star, either I can go or
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I
so
want to hear your perspective.
I'm going to slide back a little bit to 1924 and then work my way up to the civil rights movement, because I think
Good.
this is important.
Absolutely.
How to teach on. In 1924, the U.S. government had something called a preferential ordering of immigration official quotas, and it was a social economical chart. And when I look at this chart, I see all the different nationalities, skin color, religion, and immigration quota. At the top of that list, you see English. You see skin color as white. You see the religion as Protestant, and the immigration quota is open. You skip down one, you see Irish, North European, Western European, and the numbers of the quotas get smaller. Irish European get to 34,000. We go all the way to the bottom. We get to Hispanic, they're second to last, and I'm sure you can guess who's last.
Yes.
And their quota is restricted at the time, okay? But that'll play into today. And then you get African, that is closed. So when we talk about race and the state of race today, absolutely nothing has changed on this chart when we think about, at least not for blacks. Um, so when I fast forward to the civil rights movement, uh, there's a lot of things that I feel actually broke down the family. And I believe, and I think a lot of educated Black people believe that the civil rights movement harmed our community, because before the civil rights movement, now I wasn't living in the civil rights movement in that era, but before 1950s, 1940s, Black people owned their own businesses. We had our own cities and our own towns. We owned and dominated our own industries. We had our own banks and credit unions. We actually had communities. We didn't have neighborhoods. We had communities.
That's right.
And it seems as if during the civil rights movement, we traded that in for assimilation just to be accepted by the dominant white society. So in that acceptance, we allowed somebody to start making decisions for us, and we integrated, which diluted our group power. So if the question you asked, no, I think it had an adverse effect on the African American community. And I don't know what Star, she probably would have a lot more in-depth analysis of it, because she probably was living in that era.
Yeah.
She doesn't look like she was, that age. But
Thank you. Thank you. I have a young spirit.
Yeah, you look like you're about 25 years old.
Thank you.
But because you tell them on yourself with all the stories,
Well, if I can add to that, I like the way Commander King put that and put it in perspective. I think that maybe integration may have been damning to the civil rights movement, that portion of it and that element of it. But the civil rights movement needed to happen. there were people that were living on their knees in terms of human rights across globally. There were people, especially in the United States, coming out of Reconstruction, and everywhere you turn, there were people. White people were shooting you down or lynching you or what have you. Anything that the African in America did to try and better themselves, it was put down by a group of white people that did not think that as a human being we should exist. So the movement itself, I think, was quite essential. But now the integration piece, I do agree with you that we could have probably done that better, because we needed to maybe gain those resources, but stay as a community and circulate those dollars within our community, like it was done so well in so many places in America, but not for racial animus was destroyed. So I agree with you.
And if I could add to that, I think the biggest thing, because you're absolutely right, I think the civil rights absolutely needed to happen, just like the Black Lives Matter movement needed to happen. The problem was it was infiltrated, and they saw an opportunity, they saw a weakness that they could exploit, and they exploited it. They exploited it with the crack epidemic. They exploited it with the prison pipeline. They exploited all of these things that caused us to be able to break down the nuclear family, remove the father out of the home, demonize Black people as being criminals, thugs, lazy, welfare-bearing types of people. And it was really just a campaign. They saw opportunity to launch a campaign to really destroy our character, because the 50s, 40s, 20s, we were very respectful, reputable people.
Yeah.
People looked at us and they said, with jealousy, man, they got it together. We had mother, father in the house. They were married. They owned their own businesses. Like, everything was perfect. So,
and let's talk about that pride a little bit. Let's talk about that pride. That pride was such that, knowing that there were Black people, knowing that they came from this treacherous thing called slavery, that had this level of pride, that they would hold their heads up, and they would make their children hold their heads up. I remember my mother always, when she would take us to the store, it's like, hold your head up. She would tip our chin. Always hold your head up. Hold your head up. That was Black people saying that I don't care how much or what you do to me, I'm still going to carry myself with dignity. My mother, my grandmother, they had nothing, but they always dressed, and they were always, it was just that sense of pride, and that pride resonated in the community. It resonated in the community. Anybody that came into the community, if they didn't have, people would put their pennies together to make sure that everyone could have that level of pride, whether it be food, clothing, toys for the kids, whatever. So we are just a phenomenal people. We're an anomaly in the grand construct of humanity, I think.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that just a little bit? What you mean by the anomaly?
No, well, we're an anomaly in the sense that I always use the term, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Over and over again, in this country, as Africans in America, in this country, in this wilderness, over and over again, our pride and our lives have been raked over, and we've had to restart, and we get better and better each time.
Right.
And there's a lot of animus around that, because if you try to kill a weed and it just keeps growing back, you're going to throw everything you can at it. And that's how our lives, I think, that's how Africans in America are seen. We are a thorn in the side. We are a reminder of the cruelty that's been exacted, that's been posed against us. So it's painful, I think, for some white people. I think it's really painful for them to see us exist. And the history of the things that have been thrown against us, and we still keep rising.
Yeah. Somebody, I've said it on the American Doofus show before. Somebody asked me, back when I was covering all the protests that were happening in various locations, that they said, why are they protesting all the time? And I'm like, my gosh, why haven't they been protesting for decades?
Well, we have.
Yeah, it's just the white community was forced to look in the mirror with George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a fair statement?
I'll let Commander King take that one.
I think they were forced to look in the mirror almost every time something egregious happened. I think George Floyd was just so televised and so disgusting, and just a huge, mishap in human rights that they really were like, goodness gracious. Because even I was like, man, this is nuts. I mean, I've never seen, well, up until that point, I had never seen anything on television that was real, that, empty hearted. They didn't care. So we had to start thinking, and it really circles around police reform. See, people don't realize that police reform is one of the largest things that the African American community that they seek. And I think that for so long, the police and the military has been a sign and a symbol of honor in this country. And I think the white community doesn't want to have to look at, oh, we have to tear this system down that has been in existence for 150 to 200 years. Oh no,
because it benefits them.
exactly.
It benefits them.
Exactly, and as much as they will admit that,
yeah, it benefits them, and at the same time, just the basis of how it was created. With these slave patrols, and there, a lot of when the Klan was initiated after Reconstruction, a lot of the police were Klansmen.
Absolutely.
In these small towns, and these concepts grew into these cities. And so I believe the police force has the backing of these unions now, and it has too much power. There's too much power and too much lobbying that goes on, but we have to remember the inception of the police, and they still conduct themselves, in my opinion, the same way, because the culture of policing has not changed.
Absolutely. And
the objective.
If I can add to that, a very, very serious talking point, and we could probably talk on this all night. What people don't realize is that they still serve the same purpose as they did during the slave patrol. When you really analyze what their job is to find criminals, usually black, brown. Every once in a while, you'll get white, but their job is to find criminals or find just people that they can supply to the prison system, so the prison system can then put them back into involuntary servitude. What do I mean by that? Because people aren't educated about this. They don't teach this stuff in school. These for-profit prisons, how do you think they make a profit? They make a profit by saying, hey, you're going to come to my prison, and we have a contract with GE, or we have a contract with T-Mobile. We got some work that you can do, and we're going to pay you 27 cents an hour. And it's not much, but it beats sitting in a cell for 24 hours. So these companies are literally getting slave labor, and people don't understand that. I'm like, look, prison is a business.
Corrections Corporation of America is a publicly traded company.
Exactly.
And you need just read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and it just lays that out so beautifully. And it's a travesty. It's a travesty to the humanity of all Americans.
You don't
I think
with empty jail cells. You don't make profit with empty jail cells.
No, they don't.
Exactly. They don't. And the even sadder part is that they now have started to turn on their own and say, yeah, we'll take some Caucasians. We won't get out of control with it, but we'll take some Caucasians. Yeah. So really, every American should be against this type of slavery. Every American. because every American, every group is being impacted. Obviously, African Americans are disproportionately being impacted, but Caucasians, Hispanics, barely Asians. I think Asians are maybe 2% of the prison population, but I think this is something that everybody in America, if you call yourself a patriot, so-called patriot, this is something that you should be outraged about, that they are still practicing slavery in America.
Some so-called patriots are going to find out that their actions on January 6th, or what I call White Wednesday on the American Doofus Show, is they're going to find out that they're about to be fodder for a for-profit prison system, I feel.
You said January 6th. You mean
January 6th, when they the Capitol riot.
Oh, yes.
They're going to teach white people that
Oh, yeah.
discover there is a for-profit prison system, and they're going to maximize your participation in the corporation.
Yeah, but the sad part about that is the two justice systems that we operate within, and the leniency that's granted to white skin versus black skin. Let's just be honest about that.
No,
And people are like,
I don't get that a bit, but at the same time, they're going to run out of black skinned people, and they're going to have white skinned people, and they're not going to have a problem with that, is what Comedic King was saying. And they're going to taste of that from January 6th, in my opinion.
These are senators' grandchildren and actual congresswomen and men.
They're not.
I think most of them are going to get a slap on the wrist.
But the guy that sat at Nancy Pelosi's desk and kicked his feet up and held a news conference 2 days later, his ass is going to be in a sling for a while. They're going to make an example of that old boy. Now, the people related, the people connected, they'll get a slap on the wrist. Some of those white folks are going to taste the end of their actions.
I agree.
They moved him so he could get vegan food, I guess, or get.
They want to go to Peru before they're sentenced, or all this.
But let's talk about that a little bit. I try and remind Black people. I try and remind people. We know that the justice system, that there's a level of injustice when it comes to melanin and how justice is distributed and how it's applied. We already know that. We know that. So again, going back to this sense of community, we have to get back to our communities and start, again, circulating our dollars properly and policing our communities. We need police reform that's going to allow us to police our own communities. That's the only way I think that some level of justice is going to be applied. Now, what that construct looks like, that needs to be studied, but it has to happen in order for us to have some level of solvency around a system that just is not for us.
And again, as I said in the introduction, EAR is not about trying to eradicate individual identities or community identities. That's, it's about something much bigger than that. It's about changing the perception of how we look at each other, looking at each other as humans, not as black and white.
And to your point, let's talk about, like, as a native of Georgia, I know far too well the history of the Cherokees and the Trail of Tears. It's a part of my family heritage, being Seminole and Cherokee, and it's a part of my heritage. So I think people do not realize what we're talking about with Black people. That same level of inhumanity has been applied across the board globally. It has been applied in America before with the Cherokee Indians and all Native Americans on this Trail of Tears. That's what we need to start working on, trying to eradicate, and then having them understand that to the detriment of this country, that we need to reform how we look at other human beings. It was a treacherous thing. I mean, they were moved from their lands in Georgia and marched across the Midwest. That was even before the Louisiana Purchase. Meanwhile, in Haiti, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Toussaint Louverture were throwing a party, throwing a revolution. and basically, who was it? Napoleon had to sell. He opened up the West because of the Louisiana Purchase. He had to sell to fund that war with those black slaves. He had to sell parts of the from the Gulf Coast all the way up to the Canadian border, a great swath of the American. It opened up the American West. And ironically, the Trail of Tears went right across that open swath of land shortly after it got opened up. And so, I mean, it's just the way that history aligns is amazing. So we need to think about, again, Black people, people of color, period, and how everybody has been subjugated in this construct of white supremacy.
And we want to make clear that, while we are doing this 3-part series to kind of kick things off in our programs, we welcome anyone that wants to come on and talk about the history of the Latina and the Latino in America, the history of the Native Americans. If you want to come and talk about your history, we welcome that. We want to open the platform up so that your message can get out. And,
absolutely.
And this is not, while our main issue we feel as a nation currently is Black and white, it is by far not the only issue. I just want to get that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going back to the 60s, you said you had a timeline, Commander King. You had a timeline that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and going based off of where I left off with the prison pipeline, just talking about the Constitution. I think the Constitution inherently is the document that we really need to go back to in order to eradicate racism. In the Constitution, it still has us as two-fifths of a human. Okay, 3/5 of a human. Okay, so with that still in mind, it's very consequential. And then we also in the Constitution have the 13th Amendment that says, hey, you can, we're going to eradicate slavery and non-voluntary servitude, except you can't put an except in there, except if you're a criminal. You're pretty much saying, if you're a criminal, hey, back to the slavery field.
Exactly.
You go.
Yeah.
So I think we have to really take a trip back and then come to the current future in order to really fit that timeline. And then just talking about the welfare system and how it really damaged our community, and and I'm not going to, I'm probably gonna catch some hell in the comment section when I say this, but it has to be said. We also can't play the blame game and always point the finger at the white man. Okay, we have done a lot of things that I call, and Dr. Claude Anderson calls, inappropriate behavior that has pushed us back and that has prevented us from moving forward as a culture. Perfect example. And Star, she was talking about this earlier. Every other community in America takes their dollars and they spend within their own community 10, 15, 20 times. I think the Asians, they have the record right now. They keep their money in their community the longest. Black people, as soon as we get our paycheck, we go spend it with the Asians. We go spend it with Hispanics, spend it with Caucasians. So we are doing ourselves a huge dishonor. And this is an activity that we can practice amongst us. Nobody can really, they can't infiltrate us practicing root economics. I think that is the root of why we have been set back so far and why we don't have any wealth in our community except for 2%. We have 2% of America's wealth, and that's ticking down, not up. Star, how do you?
Yeah, that's a great point. But I think we have to look at the underlying. Let's say we have the affliction, but let's look at the cause of the affliction. and it's not a blame game, but I think we have to be fair to the African American community and anyone that's been subjugated in any lands globally. We have to look at the root cause of why they do some of the things they do. One, a lot of it is based on survival and based on being pushed out of an economic system that that was not available for us and that has not been there to support us, and that right, you know, like they don't want us to participate in. Let's look at that. Let's look at the trauma behind chattel slavery. Again, that dehumanization and being treated as cattle. We have to look at the trauma behind that and why we do some of the things that we do, and how we, in a lot of these cities, we were pushed into the industrial areas and where there was few resources, so a part of that is how we were raised and how we were brought up, given the resources that we could snatch or that we could try and grab a hold of. And did some of us get out of that? Yes, absolutely, because there were people that sacrificed for us to go to school, or there were people that sacrificed everything that they had and worked long hours that weren't even a part of the Social Security system. A lot of the Black women that worked in these white homes, they couldn't even, you know, claim taxes because they were working under the table, basically in a system that still kept them subjugated and basically slave in servitude and slavery. So we have to look at all of the factors before we say, well, we're here right now, we're not doing these things. If we don't understand the root cause of why we do those things, we're never going to come up with a solution and move forward. And I think that awakening is happening now because we are now starting to acknowledge our trauma in this wilderness. And until we do that collectively, we're going to be where we are. We're going to be right here in 5 or 10 years, I believe.
You mentioned economics, and one of the things I ran against when I was running for Congress was I was opposed to NAFTA, CAFTA. I said NAFTA, CAFTA. How much more of the SHAFTA is the American worker?
Yeah.
Do we say enough? And we lost a whole bunch of really good paying jobs to other countries in that time period, and a lot of communities of color had people working in those factories. What impact did that play from the 90s until now in that taking away potential opportunities that were there?
Mm-hmm.
I think that played a very large role in taking, you know, the resources. But, you know, that wasn't anything new to us. You know, that they did that as soon as we got out of slavery. We were pretty much masterminds behind farming, behind, you know, building, construction. We knew how to do everything, but we couldn't practice or reap the rewards of that because we were blocked out and boxed out. And we've constantly been boxed out and blocked out pretty much since we were emancipated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that definitely just dealt another death blow to the community. And I think the biggest thing that we have to look at, and the reason why we're in the state, Black people are in the state that we are, is, you know, the maldistribution of all the wealth, land, resources, and power that has pretty much been relegated to dominant white society. And we haven't, and also Native Americans, they've had a little bit of opportunity to participate in that, but Blacks or Native Americans really didn't have the opportunity to participate in the building of this country. And the Native Americans, they gave their land for the, you know, the wealth of this country, and we gave our labor, and we didn't get to reap the rewards of either one of those.
King, you said that the Black community had 2% of the nation's wealth. Do you know what percent, the highest number? You know, is there like a small number of Black people that have that, the majority of that 2%? Do you see what I'm saying, or what I'm asking?
I'm not 100%. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure because I haven't looked into,
Okay.
that number in depth like that.
Mhm.
But I would guess that yes, there's probably, just like with everything, just like I think they said the top 1% holds 90% of this country's
Yeah.
wealth.
Yeah.
So I think that statement you made would be dead on. I think it's probably the top 1% of our community holds 90 to 95% of the wealth that we do have.
Yeah, but I think for the sake of this conversation, let's be clear though. I know the perception is that, well, rich Black people are just basketball players, they're athletes, they're
I wasn't trying to do. I wasn't
no,
trying.
no. I know,
Trying to
but
say that the Black community, that it was the same in the Black community as it was in others. That there is a very clear dividing line between haves and
yeah.
those
But
adults.
I'm only saying this because I just thought about that, and when I talk to even people in professional settings, they're like, well, you got rappers and these athletes, they make a lot of money and this and that and blah blah blah, and so I mean, they're looking right at you in an industry that well, for me, like in an industry, there's so few of us, but they're looking right at me, and it's not.
Right.
There are a lot of brilliant people
Right.
in the African American community.
And if I could add to that too, Star, I work in the financial services industry, and I meet with a lot of families because I do retirement planning. And I meet with a lot of families, just like American Doofus. Barry, you're probably not familiar. You might be. Are you familiar with the West End?
The West End of Louisville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The West End.
I mean, I know. Yeah, I know. I know what the West End signifies. It's not like I spend a lot of time there.
It's supposed to be a poverty and stricken area. Okay.
Absolutely.
But you would be amazed with how many people down there have $50,000, $100,000 in their savings account. So a lot of these folks, they have money, they just don't have the wealth. Mm-hmm. So it just like what Star was saying, I think yes, the top one, and like I said, I'm not for sure, but the top 1% of our community, they probably do hold most of the wealth. Mm-hmm. But Black people got some money. Okay, yeah. Don't be fooled, because if we didn't have money, you wouldn't have all of these industries try to cater and market all of these different services to the Black community, like hip hop, hair. We spend $1.3 trillion on all of these different industries. So we
don't own.
Exactly. So we know that the top 1% is not spending the majority of that money.
Right.
Yeah. We are spending the majority of that money. So it's a yes and a no, answer when I think about the question that you asked. Yes, I say the top 1% holds all the wealth, but I think, the 99%, they still have a lot of coins that they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm for some reason, and I think I know why. I think it's the weather. I keep getting a low bandwidth warning here, and I've cut out once before. I hope it didn't cut out in the recording. It just
no, it was only once. It was only once.
Okay. Okay. Did you see it cut out?
Not.
I saw you cut out.
Okay, I cut out, but you guys kept recording.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah,
so for the last segment here, and by the way, the three of us are going to be back next week, and we're going to pick this up from where we end tonight, and we're going to talk about the future and what the future might be and what we can do to get to that future. And if you are a young person that's happening to be watching this, and you're inspired by the fact that you think the world can be different than it is now, and you think maybe these crazy people that you're watching are going to start a path towards that, send me an email, americandoofus@gmail.com. We'd love to have you part of the panel towards the future. We want to have a young person on here talking with us next week. Yeah. With all that being said, how do we do better?
Well, if we can go back about the economics and talk about 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's to me that's that's almost present. I was a gleam in the eye at that point and was going to be popping out several years later. But yeah, to me, that's almost the present. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when we talk about group economics, we're talking about people that had nothing. These were people that were traveling to the homes, a lot of women that were traveling to the homes, Black men traveling to their jobs, but Black women traveling to the homes of white women to take care of their kids and take care of their homes. But when we decided to practice group economics and we pulled our resources together and said, I'll give you a ride, I'll do this, we'll come together and we'll make sure that you get to your job, but we're going to boycott the bus system. It almost shut Montgomery down. But what happened is, like in a lot of cases, when you start messing with white dollars, there is a backlash and there's violence that comes against you, i.e., there were people that were arrested for giving other Black people rides to their jobs. So that's the kind of dynamics that I'm talking about, that we have to be fair when we say, why are we not where we should be, or why are we not like where other people are? We've had a lot of climbing to do uphill. And that's just one example. But it is an example of making sure that Black dollars get circulated and making sure that we practice group economics. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And Barry, to answer your question, how can we do better? Now, let me ask you a question before I answer your question. When you
Absolutely.
say we, do you mean we as Americans, or do you mean we as the Black community?
Well, I have never claimed to speak for the Black community, so I don't mean that. I do mean we as Americans, and I also mean we together as Americans, obviously, and we as white people that want to do better, and take it all. Let's just, as somebody says in the White House now, let's circle back around to all three phases. How can we do better? How can we do better together? And how can we do better separately to make it better for all of us?
Well, I'll answer that in two phases. So together, what can we do? The biggest thing, and I think everybody would agree that we can do, is educate ourselves. Pick up a book.
Yeah.
White people, pick up a book about Black people.
Yeah.
Black people, we don't need to pick up a book about white people because
that's all the books that are in the schools.
So I think, if the other cultures, Hispanics, Native Americans, white, if they picked up alternative educational books and they really learned the true history and they truly learned what was really done, and they really could get those stereotypes out of their mind. Because in order for anything to get better, we have to start right here. And we have to, erase those stereotypes that we have about a certain group of people. And just to think about it, we have to do the same thing that was done with the Jews. Okay. They had to erase the stereotypes that was pretty much given to them by Hitler and the Nazis. So that's what we can do together. Individually, I think my community, what we can do, and this will make America strong as a whole, is I think that we first have to be separate but equal instead of integration. Okay, now I don't mean we need to be desegregated, but I mean we need to have our communities come back together. We need to start practicing the group economics. We need to really erase all of the negative history that's been taught. Just like, I was talking to one of my cousins earlier. I'm like, I don't like the term African American. I'm like, that term was coined in 1600s, and that was used as a social construct to pretty much say, hey, this is going to be the group that's at the bottom and always at the bottom. So we have we have to reprogram our minds.
Yeah. Did you hear what I said though? I said Africans in America.
Right.
My family gets mad when I say that. I said I am an African in America.
Right. And that's why I said I'm not an African American. This is not my homeland. This is not, at least that I know of.
While we're on that topic, what is acceptable for for white people that don't want to be offensive?
Oh, it's not that it's offensive. It's just
Okay. Okay. All right.
it's not offensive. Because I think another thing about my generation, at least, we're too soft, we're too sensitive. Oh, that hurt my feelings. No, look, man, come on. They're getting ridiculous. Okay, so no, it's not offensive. It's
Okay.
just, I prefer not to identify as an African American. If I'm going to identify as anything, it's going to be an African. I'm an African. Okay, my ancestors are from Africa. And when you think about it, what other group of people identify themselves as, their primary group and then a subgroup? Okay.
That's a white person thing. White people always say Asian Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans.
Right.
They were here first, but they don't matter as much as those of us that are here now.
But
that's just being 100.
You never hear, oh, I'm Polish American or I'm Italian American, or no, Europeans, they have their culture intact. So they can call themselves where they're from and where they know their roots to be. I want that same type of respect. I want to know where my roots are. I want to be, because at the end of the day, when you go to Africa, they don't call themselves Africans. They call themselves Sudanese people or Nigerians or Egyptians. Okay. And that's how I view it. And I think once we can gain our identity back, and once we can start practicing group economics and come together and be a superpower, then that will do nothing but strengthen our country, because division is going to make us weak, and it's going to make us an open target for all our enemies. I'm sure Russia, they're loving this right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Chris and I talked about that on our military. So yeah.
They're loving.
Well, they've helped create the new division. They've helped the more modern division.
I've always said I think Donald Trump is a spy.
Yeah. Hey, if I actually used to work in some of the same circles with Malcolm Nance. So if you ever have a chance to listen, he's almost prophetic, and what from an intel perspective and how these things work, he's just been spot on. He has not missed a beat in terms of what he understands and how this Rubik works. Right. This Rubik works.
King, you said you wanted to go to almost separate but equal. Now, we tried that once, and they forgot the but equal part. Okay, they were real good with the separate part, but they forgot the but equal part. And you mentioned Nazis and how they programmed the thought process towards Jews. The term ghetto comes from where they herded the Jews.
That is a Jewish word.
In our pre-involvement in World War II. So there's many tie-ins. But can you clear that up, what you mean exactly, separate but equal, as far as spending in your own communities? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about more like a separate land mass, if you will, a separate state, a state carved out of somewhere that is for the Black community?
Sure.
What are you talking about?
So when I say
so people that are watching are clear.
Right. So when I say separate but equal, I mean we have our own, okay? And when I say separate, I don't mean we have to be separated. I mean we have identifiable areas that is ours. We have our own police department. We have our own politicians. We have our own judges. We have our own schools that we control. We have our own, and we can practice. I hit this on the head so many times, self-determination. We don't have self-determination. We don't control the school system.
We don't own anything.
We don't control anything in this country. And we can't expect to get respect from anybody if we don't control anything. So when I say separate but equal, I mean that we have identifiable cities like Little Havana, Little Chinatown.
Gotcha.
Little Cuba.
Yeah.
Areas where it's identified that, oh, okay, that is the native Blacks or whatever you want to call us. That's theirs. Okay. They have their own police department. They have their own everything. That's what I mean. That we have.
So to your point, let's look at in any city that you go into where there's a Chinese community, there's a Chinatown. Juxtapose that with when you look at Africans in America, in any city that you go into where Black people congregate, it's called the hood.
Exactly.
It's called the ghetto.
Not a community.
It's called the hood.
And most of the time, guess what?
It is.
There aren't any businesses there.
Right.
There are just
there are businesses there,
yeah.
But it's not our own people, Barry. It's
That's right.
Yeah, I apologize. That's what I was saying. There aren't Black-owned businesses there.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you go to these other towns, Chinatown, Little Havana, it's all the native people. And that's why you go there. You go there to be able to partake in their culture, to be able to partake in the Chinese food, to be able to partake in their decorations, and you go to Little Havana for the same thing, for the food, the music, a cigar, you know. And yeah.
But now, to your point, that's a brilliant point, Barry, because to your point, the reason that we cannot say that about African Americans in America is because America has created this construct around how you treat the African in the wilderness, how you treat the African in America. It's written into our Constitution. It is written into our laws. It's written into every fabric of this country that the African in America is subjugated and less than a human being, or is not worthy of partaking or being a part of all of those benefits of being an American.
And has no culture. So
yeah.
So that's why I said we need to really go back to and get back to our roots, because we have a culture, and it's not an African American culture. That's a made up culture that was built off of survival mode, always been in survival mode. We're very creative. So we created a culture built off of slavery. And that's why I say the hip hop culture, the African American, that is slave culture. We need to go back to our native African culture. And we need to really take a look at history and learn where we came from. Because if we don't know where we came from, we have no identity.
Yeah, Sankofa. And so what you say about hip hop and all of these other things that we brought, the music we brought to America, that is not, now even hip hop, it didn't start off the way that it is right now, that it's been hijacked by the music industry. It started out as a form of expression. We are very expressive people. We're very emotional. We're very rooted to the earth, if you will. And so that hip hop culture in some genres has been taken just totally off of the initial creation of what it was, these griots.
Absolutely. So let me correct myself. Let me correct myself so people don't so I can make sure people don't think that I'm saying that slave culture is fake culture. What I'm saying is we took some of the African culture and infused it into American culture, but it was all built off of being in survival mode. And and absolutely, hip hop started off as something great, and these executives, I guess, I hear the Jewish hijacked that part of the industry. They said, hey, you don't call your fellow woman a B, and you don't call your fellow, brother an N-word and say you're gonna murder him, we're not putting you on the radio. You're not getting a check. So
that's absolutely true. But how did that happen? That happened because they had the resources. They had the resources, and they were playing in which we could not be in. We were restricted from, unless you brought these things. Most people, when they come to the sandbox, if they have white skin, they could just go in. But if you have dark skin and you try to get into the sandbox, okay, well, there's a whole checklist as to when you can be invited and when and how long you can stay.
And how you gotta act and conduct yourself.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Nick Cannon is a perfect example of allowing somebody to play in the sandbox, but you gotta act a certain way.
Yeah, that's right. There are many examples. So that's really, really interesting. But it's and that's not to say, now for me, in order for us to change, I think that there needs to be a national and international moratorium on the construct of racism, and really examining that and what that really means from an economic standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, just from at the molecular level, that needs to be examined, and how to deconstruct racism and move that into a pool of humanity. And from an economic standpoint, that's going to be very difficult because too many people make money on racism.
Yep.
Too many people make money under the guise of racism. That ability to subjugate another human being for your benefit, for your financial benefit, is going to be really, really hard to deconstruct and destroy.
Yep.
Okay. Now that's a good spot for us to end on for tonight. An episode we're going to have in the future. We need to talk about people that are of mixed race, and how, because that's like got to be one of the hardest things. You've got you're trying to straddle two communities, if you will. And I want to talk about that in an upcoming episode. I just want to make sure that the people that are watching that are of those circumstances don't think that we're not aware, or because of the directions we're heading at the moment.
Even that element of colorism in the African American community, that would be a very interesting. It'd be great to have someone on, especially from Louisiana, to talk about that divide and what that construct looks like in America.
Absolutely.
And why it is.
It's probably a conversation that needs had.
All
All right.
That'd be great.
All right. You two going to come back next Wednesday, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. I look forward to it. Thank you so very much. And thank all of you so very much. The GoFundMe link will be in the description of this. And if you want to be a contributor, you can go ahead and start right now. All you got to do is hit the GoFundMe and help us to get this movement off the ground. We thank you so very much for watching. And tomorrow night, the American Doofus Show is going to be back. We're going to be talking about a Louisville sheriff, or a Louisiana sheriff, that sheriff's deputy that took his own life because he couldn't stand the what he was seeing with police brutality. Yeah. And we're also going to be talking about March the 14th, which is a new QAnon conspiracy that Donald Trump will be inaugurated March the 19th, or March the 4th, as the 19th president of the United States. So that's what's coming up tomorrow night on the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus, by the way. And thanks again to Star. Always a pleasure to talk to such a lovely, intelligent, articulate woman. Comedic King, my man, thank you so very much. I think it's powerful when a young handsome black man and an older white dude can have a conversation, no matter where it's at, what it's about. I think it's powerful that we do it. And I thank you so very much, my man, for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Always great to talk to you.
No problem. Right. For having me, Barry.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Until next week, thank you so very much. It's ending all racism. It's EAR. It's past time, but we're going to try to tackle it, and we need your help. Hit the GoFundMe button. Leave us a little something to help this movement get off the ground. God bless you all. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.